We know that we need to teach in a way that is valid, reliable, and transparent. But what does that even mean, and how do we achieve that? Well, I'm here today to give you 6 ways that you can achieve this in your classroom today. Hi, Suze here from Shocking Teachers, and I'm here today to give you 6 ways to enhance the academic reliability, validity, and transparency in your classroom today. So let's start with validity. So what is it? Do your students always ask you, why do I have to learn this? And when am I ever going to use this in my future? And your stock standard answer of, because I say so, and trust me, you just will, it doesn't fly. They don't care. They want to know why they have to learn it. This is where validity comes into play in our classroom teaching programs and in our assessments. And there are a couple things that we need to do to ensure validity. Number 1 is that we need to stick to the standards. Now, if you've got super bright kids in your class or super curious kids in your class, by all means, go above and beyond those standards that are set by your state, territory, or country. Go for it. But what's that saying? No child left behind. If you've got kids who are not meeting those minimum standards, you need to stop and you need to go back to those minimum standards, make sure every child is hitting them before you go on. Sure, extend your bright kids, but make sure that every kid is meeting those minimum standards. Number 2, you need to link your projects and everyday classroom teaching to real world situations. Now, generally speaking, don't shoot me now, students these days are generally only concerned about things that personally affect them. Now, I don't know about you, but in my classrooms, my students are very inward centered, and unless it's going to affect them personally, they really don't care. So we have to make sure that we pick real world situations that make sense to them. This gives them the why to that learning. When they ask, why are we doing this? You can give them a reason why that pertains directly to them, thus engaging them in their own learning. Year 7 science students at the moment in our school are doing an assignment when they are looking at the creek that runs through our school and deciding whether it is healthy by looking at a whole bunch of tests that they're going to run themselves, and writing a letter of recommendation to our principal as to what can be done to make our creek a better environment for organisms to live in. Now, for some of these kids, this creek has been a part of their every school day life since they were 3 or 4 years old. So for them, it's personally related because it's their school, it's their creek, and they are going to give recommendations to make it better. So this is a really good example of a real world situation turned into a project for our kids. Now, a note about real world situations. Be really careful about what situations you choose to use. They need to be current to the student's age. You're not going to give a real world situation to Year 7 students that you would give to Year 12 students because their brains are just not capable of functioning on that level just yet. So keep it age appropriate. And of course, be sensitive to what your students are going through at home. There is no point doing a real world situation project if you know that one of your kids has this particular problem going on in their own personal life. It's too close to home for them and they don't have the coping skills for that at this time. So steer clear of very negative real world situations and be very careful about your research, not just about your real world situation, but about the kids in your class too. No one knows your kids better than the parents, themselves, and you. This leads into reliability. So when I'm talking about reliability, I'm talking about keeping students accountable and dealing with student authenticity when it comes to academics. So there are a couple of places where we need to look at academic reliability. The first one is in exams. Exams need to give reliable feedback of where students are at and where they're falling behind. But if students are able to cheat or copy or plagiarize off somebody else, that's not a reliable indicator of what that individual student can do. So when students are sitting exams, I find the best thing that we can do is to seat them appropriately. I found that rows of desks, one behind the other, with a fair amount of space between the desks for the teacher to walk through if necessary, works the best that I've seen so far. It's too far for students to really look. They can't see past the person in front of them as long as there's a decent amount of distance in front of them, and it takes away that temptation to try and cheat off somebody else. The other thing in terms of exams is a lot of schools and a lot of teachers like to pace up and down the aisles. This actually doesn't help. Number one, it's a massive distraction to students. It makes them nervous as heck, especially when they're seated and you're standing above them. Don't read over their shoulder, because that is so nerve-wracking and anxiety-causing that they're just going to flunk it. So don't do it. I found that also if you are walking the aisles, some students are going to be at your back at all times. You can't see what's behind you. Even with our proverbial eyes in the back of our heads as teachers, we can't tell if kids behind us are cheating or not. I found that the best thing to do in these situations is sit on a desk or sit on a high chair up in the left or right corner at the front of your classroom, and then you can see every student at a glance, and they can see you. They can see that you are watching, and it takes away that temptation to cheat, because it's too easy to get caught in that kind of situation. The other thing you need to consider in terms of exams is if you have flexible seating in your classroom, you need to think very carefully about how you can arrange that flexible seating to be more reliable in terms of what the students can do. So for example, my Year 7 science classroom don't sit at normal desks. They've got 5 tall benches with 6 students to a bench. They're all elbow length apart, and they're this far away from the person in front of them. Far too easy to look at that one or look at this one and copy, because when they're in Year 7, they're only worried about passing, and it's too much of a temptation for them. We shouldn't be giving them that temptation. So what I did was I arranged with another teacher in my school to do a classroom swap with me. She had regular desks, and I was able to move them into my rows that I like them to have, and students were less tempted to cheat, and I could actually get a real good look at what each kid actually knows without having to worry about whether they've cheated off somebody else. The next point number 4, is looking at assignments and projects. So what we do at our school in terms of projects and assignments is we split them up into checkpoints. We find essential points in the assignment where we can look at a progression of the student's work. So for example, our Year 8 maths assignment this term had to do with scale drawings and sphero coding. If you don't know what sphero is, it's a little robot ball. So we split it up so that 1 week after the assignment was handed out, their scale drawing was due. That was checkpoint 1. Scale drawing was due. They had to upload a copy of that to our class page. You're not marking these. It's not extra marking, so don't think of it as extra marking. It's just seeing that the kids are actually doing it. It's making them accountable so that they're not leaving it till the last minute, the night before the assignment is due. It keeps them accountable, right? 2 weeks after that, they had to hand in, or they had to upload a copy of a screenshot of their sphero coding. So they're complete or near completed sphero coding. This shows that they haven't been mucking around in class, and it shows that they know what they're trying to achieve. Now, the reason we use these checkpoints is not only to keep the students accountable, but it's also to show us where the students are at. If they're really struggling, we can then pick it up before the 2 days before it's due, and we can help them well in advance and get them on the right track really easily. It's quick and easy to pick up. You don't get any last minute freakouts from the kids because they know where they're meant to be going. Checkpoint 3 is a pre-submission. Now, pre-submission and a draft are 2 very different things. You don't mark a pre-submission. A pre-submission is a placeholder for your final copy. That's all it is. It just shows that the kids have actually done some work. Okay? The draft should be due a week or so before the pre-submission is due, and that is a hard copy, and it is given to the teacher well in advance for you to, not to mark, to give suggestions for improvement. Alright, make sure that you're getting that draft back in good time for students to then work on to finish their pre-sub. So like I said, pre-submissions are a placeholder for finals. If a student doesn't hand in their final, or what we would call checkpoint 4, then you mark the pre-submission. Okay, and students need to know this. It is really important that you explain this very carefully to students so that they know this. And that leads me into transparency. Okay, so as a teacher, we do not like to be left in the dark, right? We do not like it when our colleagues go and decide on something and they don't tell us, and then we're lost and we feel overwhelmed and we don't know what's going on. It's the worst feeling in the world, right? Well, it's the same for students. Students do not like to be left in the dark in terms of their learning. They need to know what they are trying to achieve. They need to know what you expect of them in terms of your academic standards. So we're very clear about what behaviour standards we set, but oftentimes we're not very clear about what academic standards we set. So number 5 is to make sure that we have very clear learning goals or learning intentions. Now, it's very tempting to write a list of 20 million learning goals, but that is hugely overwhelming for kids, and it is hugely overwhelming for you. The kids will just switch off. It's too hard. They're not going to bother trying. There's too many things to check off and they just get lost. And for you, trying to keep track of where every kid is on 20 million learning goals, it's near on impossible, and you're going to end up giving up and you're not going to want to do it again. So I would suggest 5 to 7 very key, very well written learning goals that match up to the set standards for your subject. That's all you really need. In terms of making sure your students know what the learning goals are, make them big, blow them up, put them on the wall, make them huge so that the students know exactly what they need to achieve. There is no excuse, if they can see that every single day, to not hit every single one of those learning goals. Give them a paper copy, make them glue it into their notebooks because you know they're going to lose them, right? Make them glue it in. Make them highlight them. Make them check them off every time that they have finished one. In fact, do a pacing chart. Put your students' names down one side and your learning goals across the top, and have students tick them off as they achieve them. That way it is a self-paced learning chart, and they know what they need to catch up on. They know if they've missed something. They can see if they're behind all the other students and that they need to get a wriggle on. And it's a visual for you as well to see where all your students are at. That's a really good feedback cue for you as a teacher to be able to see where every student is at and if a student is being left behind or not. And to see which students need to be extended just that little bit more. Now, in saying that, make sure that these learning goals are based very tightly around your set standards for your state, territory or country. Alright, it's really important that they match up. There's no point having set standards and then separate learning goals and then trying to marry them because you've written them separately. Actually look at your standards and write your learning goals from those standards. Write them around the standards and then they will marry in perfectly together. Number 6 is your marking system. How are you marking their exams? How are you marking their projects and assignments? It is really important that we're transparent about the way we're going to mark something. For example, if you're going to use a rubric to mark an assignment, give the kids the rubric. Give them a paper copy. Again, make them glue it in their notebooks. Blow it up, put it on the wall, put it up on the projector if you've got one, or your intelligent whiteboard or whatever, those interactive whiteboard. Put it up on one of those if you have to, and go through it step by step with them. If there is subject-specific jargon in there, which there will be because your standards all have subject-specific jargon in them, go through them and explain what they are. Have your students annotate what each of those subject-specific terms mean, and that way they know exactly what they're looking for in words that they can understand. So make sure you hand out those rubrics before you even start the task. In our school in the maths department, we actually mark using an ISMG. or an instrument-specific marking guide. And we hand this out to the students at the beginning of every assessment piece. We make sure it's stuck up in the classroom. We make sure it is available to them 24/7 on the class pages, because we want them to know what they have to do. I mean, if it takes an entire lesson dedicated to explaining how you're going to be marking these assignments and the standards that you expect of your students, then that's what you need to do. And if students know exactly what we're asking of them, they don't have to take a stab in the dark and guess and pray for the best. And we don't sit there going, oh gosh, I hope I get what I want out of this, because I don't actually know where they're at, or whether they're leaving it till the last minute, or if they even understand what's going on, because we've explained to them what we want. And that is really being transparent academically. That was my 6 ways to enhance your academic validity, reliability, and transparency in your classroom. So go on, I encourage you, put those 6 things into practice today. Some of them you can do straight away. Some of them are going to take a little bit of work, and some of them you might have to, address with your team if you have a learning or a teaching team. But I encourage you to do those things, because it makes a world of difference, not just to you as a teacher, not just to your school, but to your kids. They'll thank you for that. They really, really, truly will. So, if you enjoyed this video and you liked what you saw, give me a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button down below and just leave me some love in the comments. I do love a comment. If you have any questions about validity, reliability, and transparency, if you have any questions at all even, if there's particular content that you want me to cover, let me know and I will attempt to make a video of that. I try to respond to all comments. Of course, at this point I get very few comments, so it's not that hard for me to do. But please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side. Bye!